Everyone, and welcome. My name is Joe Davidge. I'm the Executive Director here at the Georgia Center for the Book. And on behalf of the Georgia Center for the Book, the Decatur Arts Alliance, the Dekalb County Public Library, and the Dekalb Library Foundation, welcome to our first in a series of virtual artist talk for the new exhibition, The Book is Art, Volume 12, Rock, Paper, Scissors. We are so pleased to come to you virtually over the next few weeks to feature several of the artists whose artist books are on display on the 4th floor here at the Decatur Library in our gallery. You can find more about our gallery hours, and if you can't attend during regular gallery hours, learn how to book a private gallery tour or a small session in the afternoons so you can come in and explore these books. Please also remember that on October 28th, 2024, we will be hosting our White Glove Night as we close the Book as Art for this year and allow you to look through some of these books. Just a few things before we begin. All of these talks, of course, will be posted to the Georgia Center for the Book YouTube channel. So don't forget to check out all of the artist videos as well as many of our recorded author talks there, and like and subscribe so you can find more of those talks in your feed. For this evening's presentation, we ask if you want to ask the artists a question after their formal presentations to use the Q&A feature. You'll find those features at the top or the bottom of your screen, depending on your device. You'll also find the closed caption feature, where if you click that particular button, you can resize the font to make it more legible to you as well. In the chat, you'll find information about the artists, information about the art exhibit, and the upcoming Decatur Book Festival as well. Right now, I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce both of our artists this evening and then turn the program over to them. Denise Stephenson has been making books for nearly 25 years, but it is only in the last 2 years as a retiree that they call themselves a book artist. Over the summer, they received their first accolades, one from the Puget Sound Book Artists and one from the Focus on the Book Artists Conference. Both highlighted their 3D strength as a structural designer. In February, they took on a 100-day Instagram challenge, which turned into a 100-book goal for the year. They are on track to make that goal a reality and will share a number of those books with you tonight. Their books are in the Yale Library, the University of Indiana, and the Topeka Library Special Collections, as well as being held by many private collectors. Their book in the display this year is called Counting Loss. Our next artist is Donna Stepien, who taught communication design for over 30 plus years. She led book, journal, zine making classes for teachers at shelters for the homeless, schools, in after-school programs, art institutions, craft centers, in an Eastern institutions, Europe UNESCO founded program, and at college and university classes. She co-developed a teacher education course to teach math and science teachers to use design activities to teach K-12 Common Core subjects. Donna teaches all ages as young as 5. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology with fine arts area study from Damon College, and an MBA from Parnassus College, an MFA from SUNY Buffalo, and currently she has master's credits from Goddard College, Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Landmark College. Donna's artwork and artists' books have been published and exhibited mostly in New England and in New York State, but we are very happy to have one of her books here in Georgia. That particular book on display is called The Story of My Home. Thank you once again for joining us this evening, and I'd like to turn it over to our first artist, Denise Stephenson. Denise?
Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and I think have so many friends attending, although from the webinar side, you can't tell that. So thank you. I'm going to share my slides here. I'm assuming those are visible. It looks like it to me. Someone will let me know if they're not. Okay. I titled my talk tonight, Listening to the Voices Within, How the 100-Day Challenge Evolved into 100 Books. For the next roughly 20 minutes, I'm going to show you books I've made in 2024 in the hope of revealing both the inspiration to make artist books and the drive that is developing that art for me. My piece in the Book as Art, Rock, Paper, Scissors exhibit is a trio of letterpress poetry books collectively titled Counting Loss. You'll see the covers of individual books during the presentation. If you want to read the poems, I won't be reading them tonight, they still choke me up, or see how the letterpress was used to emphasize the poetry, I'll post the URL in the chat when I'm done with my portion of the webinar. When that happens, please feel free to copy it. Don't look at it now, explore it later so that you're able to pay attention to what we're doing here tonight. The vehicle I'm using to describe how I listen to the voices will be the 100-day project, which I always refer to as a challenge. Though it began in 2013, I only discovered it this year and started it February 18th. This Instagram challenge is open to any project a person chooses. 100 days is a long time. I initially chose to create a book a day, but you'll see how I reinterpreted that goal as I went along. I started the project with a full 7 books in the first week, even though one day I didn't make one. I began day 1 by assembling You Can Never Be Ready, one of the books in Counting Loss. I had letterpressed them nearly a year before, but had not found the courage to actually assemble them. Next, I created a Turkish mapfold book called Train to Greymouth. It contains a poem my partner gifted me that morning. It was striking to me how quickly I chose both structure and materials for this book. It felt like an omen that my project would go well. On days 3 and 7, I found free videos from Kit Davey to guide the making of these 2 books. The first was familiar, but the video reminded me of the structure. The second was new to me and so interesting that I made another with a slightly different fold to investigate what might happen. I liked it equally well. Day 4, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't make a book. Day 5, I made a box for some of my zines and a geometric star tunnel book that Lori Moorhead had provided me instructions for many months prior. Day 6, I stitched a piece of my own marbled paper and created an accordion book from it. The stitches were too similar in color to stand out. By the end of week 1, 7 books done, a bit exhausted, I realized that what mattered to me was content, especially marrying it to structure, so I had to slow down. Perhaps make a book every 2 days? Piecing it together, a response to the mosaic prompt for the Instagram challenge, Are You Book Enough?, took not 2, but 3 days to create, mostly because I experimented with several techniques to get the triangular pieces onto the page. Actual paper cuttings, the red group, colored pencil, the green group, and rubber stamp cutoffs, the pink and purple group. I enjoyed creating the content and was pleased with the book. But at that rate, I wouldn't even make 50 books. Where was the sweet spot between luxurious exploration and completing books? I'd been working on surface design skills for at least a year. I used collage materials I'd recently made for the book on the left, which is a design I found from Kit Davey, and for spinning marbles on the right, and yes, those tall rectangles actually spin. I used paper I had marbled in an online class with Pietro Accardi. This structure came from a free video by Ali Manning. This has been one of my most delightful books, which I have exhibited, but also which I take with me to show artist friends who are always pleased by it. These tiny books, well, wait, I skipped one here. There we go. On day 18, out of the blue, I got the reorganization impulse from my flat file filled with paper. I attempted to reject the urge, telling myself I needed to make books. But a lifetime of learning to follow my voices led to a full day of reorganizing the paper in several drawers. These tiny books, each less than 2 inches square, emerged from the scrap I uncovered. They fit perfectly with the advice that book artist and friend Gina Pacello gave me at the start of my project: keep them small. Many, many years ago, I made the book on the left. I had lots of material left over, and those were found while I was reorganizing. So I made these 3 new books from the discovered pieces. The 2 on the left, half the size of the one on the right, which is roughly 3.5 by 5 inches. With the larger one, I used a faux leather for the spine, which was a new material to me, and it sort of oscillates down the spine. By the next time I used that material, however, I understood better its malleability. At day 30, March 17, I was only 8 books behind the original goal. Not bad. Evaluating and re-evaluating throughout has been a way to keep myself grounded and moving forward. I also finished assembling the other 2 books in Counting Loss on exhibit, Elegy and First Person Singular. Not having access to a letterpress, I struggled to imagine how to put a title on the slipcase that would match adequately. Even when the decision was made and the apparatus to create a cutout title borrowed, I still delayed. The slipcase counted as number 47, but it wasn't completed until day 79. Though the poems were written long before I began, creating these letterpress artist books took 20 months from inception to completion. The simplest of artist books, in many ways, made, after all, from a single sheet of paper, is a zine. Each of my zines is an edition of at least 20, but I counted them for this project as a single book. One of my motivations to keep making artist books comes from the Moorhead National Zine Collective, which I belong to. For over a year, we've been making a themed zine every month and sending it out to 20 members. On the left, you can see a zine depicting my 100-day project. In the middle on top, you can see a zine that is getting different, where I'm using 3 different stamps that I hand carved to create 14 impressions on each zine for a total of 280 marks for those 20 zines. I can be a little crazy. I mean, zines are usually photocopied. I could have just done one and photocopied it, but that wouldn't have had the handmade quality that I was really looking for in this particular zine. Steps Through Time is a response to the Puget Sound Book Arts call for their annual membership exhibit, which had a time travel theme. It took a full week to successfully execute cascading pages that flipped flawlessly and learn how to create a spine using craft text, another new material. Steps Through Time tells the story of a sudden, excruciating pain, an audible pop in my right knee, which happened as I descended stairs with a suitcase to come home from New Zealand. Because we crossed the international date line, I spent more than a day living that trauma before I could see a doc. Each pair of pages tells what happened at exactly the same time, though the top page happened in New Zealand and the lower page in California. Let me play a video and show you how that worked. First, I'm just going to point out on the cover here, this international date line going not very straight, but down the middle. On the left here, we have New Zealand, and on the right of that line, we have California. I'll take just a moment to point out 11 a.m. January 30th, 2024, which happens on both pages, and that happens throughout this book. On the top is where I was in New Zealand, in this case, Oneroa, and on the bottom, LAX International. So it starts right here with my suitcases that are too heavy, but because really this 11 a.m. was 17 hours later, I was the last person to depart the plane, a plane that I won't actually get onto until many pages later on the top. Just a bit of dissonance, which helps with the time travel theme. So 3 months later, I was surprised how difficult it was to create a zine about the exact same event. I thought it would come together quickly. But the shift in theme from time travel to travel apocalypse, and the change in structure from one I designed to a zine meant I needed entirely different narrative and imagery. While this surprised me, it's also why I love making artist books, because the form and the function interact so intimately. These photos show 28 of the 34 books I had at halfway through, but I hadn't lost the desire to make those 100 books. It didn't matter that I wouldn't accomplish it in 100 days. I decided a reasonable timeline might be to the rest of 2024. My partner is a playwright. He once wrote a 3-minute version of Godot. Early on, when I asked for material, he provided the script. We worked together talking about how I might represent Godot through book structures. I chose structures and he revised lines to highlight qualities. I created this gatefold where the reader is the one who can put the repetitive lines in any sequence they want. And a flag book where the stickomythia of short lines can interplay in set ways. One day yet this year, I'll create the final version, a regular codex of the script itself. All 3 are identical in size and will be assembled in a box with a colophon detailing the variations and process. I was reminded of this structure when Julie Hawking, a friend of mine, wanted to know how to fold this origami frame. She'd done it before, but couldn't remember the process. The exercise that we went through led not only to the book of flowers on the left, photos which I took, but also several books not pictured. It delivered to me a structure to use for poems I had received earlier from my friend Michelle Naka-Pierce, who offered content to me early on in the 100 days. She gave me 4 short poems, part of a longer series she's working on. Using Sumi Nagashi paper I'd been saving forever, I found this structure to perfectly encapsulate them. Keeping with Gina's suggestion, all of these books, roughly 2 inches. Market emerged from a session where I'd created these long accordion pages with varying black and gold marks using multiple tools. The structure using bamboo skewers to create a piano hinge binding was taught to me years ago by Helen Hebert. It's an incredibly versatile structure that I use frequently. These photos demonstrate what accordions attached in this manner can do. The more sculptural a structure can be, the better I tend to like it. Since lockdown, Book Arts friends have been praising the Handmade Book Club to me, but while I was working full-time, I feared I would waste money as a member. As with the book Spinning Marbles that I showed you earlier, I started by mining the free videos that Allie Manning offer, and I quickly signed up to join the club. Allie invites a guest artist each month, which inspired these books, both blank and with content. Counting both book and Altoid tins in the upper middle allowed me to move toward that goal a little more efficiently. From the archives and monthly books, I sought structures new to me. Here, the spider, secret Belgian, and buttonhole bindings, all on the outside with my own marbled paper and fabric, but blank on the inside, as are these. Though I am drawn to learn new structures, I am learning to balance that with content-based books, which are more difficult. I've made blank structures for at least 25 years, but until retirement 2 years ago, had few where the content was wedded to the structure. However, when I get stuck or I feel I'm behind, creating a new structure gets paper in my hands, which often leads to new book ideas. So these 9 so-called blank books are part of my process of moving toward the goal of 100. Earlier, I showed you my mosaic book inspired by Are You Book Enough? Here are some other themes I have recently responded to from them. From left to right, edge, typography, and surprise, numbers. I don't have a picture of all 62 books that I completed during that 100 days. I had sold some, had some on exhibit, had given some as gifts. So here's a photo of many of the books, as well as some of the ways that I did note keeping to keep track of all the creation I was going through and all the ideas that kept popping into my head or coming across my purview. Since the end of the 100-day project, I've continued making books, albeit much more slowly. Not only standing as metaphor for that pace, but also as one of my most endearing creations. This circular book with radial hinges tends to delight everyone. As these photos hopefully indicate, her body is lithe as she moves. Her circles are 3.5 inches in diameter, and she lives in a garden of paper I marbled. She's also been known to hide in my bag if I'm going to see other book artists. 79 books finished! With 3 months and 21 books to reach my goal. I think I can do that. I currently have 5 newish books in some stage of development, as well as 4, I think, that I've mentioned to you tonight from earlier projects. I found that having ideas for books on the tack board above my computer, paper cut for one book, paper folded for another, notes from research, documents with content mid-development, assemblages of colored thread or piles of possibilities all keep me making books. However, I also know that if I put those pieces in a box, even a clear one, I won't remember I have them. So periodic tidying up, whether that be flat file drawers or studio surfaces, is very important. When do I do that? Mondays? Afternoons? I do that tidying when the voice inside me is muddled and I'm at loose ends. Whoops. I do listen to my voices, my intuition, and mostly I do what it suggests. What should I do? Whether that's the big 100-day project or the next book to make, I commit to something or nothing happens. That first week taught me how important it was not to flounder in indecision. When do I change gears? I often put down a book that's not coming together in some way, but changing the scope of the 100 days was much larger. As I contemplated options, I kept reminding myself that no one was telling me what to do. So the primary question was, what did I want to do? What would make me happy? Joyful? How do I keep going? I've learned to recognize the voices, the siren's call that emanates from many places. The more of them I keep in play, the easier it is. So here's a short list from this year's search for 100 books. I let materials talk, invite friends to collaborate, bind art explorations, watch videos, create community, and answer exhibition calls. I let the materials talk to me. Book artists have a deep love of paper. Looking at it, touching it, selecting paper, or unearthing it from storage all provide inspiration. Inviting friends, whether they be writers or other artists, to collaborate has always been a driving force for me. I've been busy developing 2D skills, but have too often left that exploration as separate from bookmaking. I'm learning to pause and ask what those explorations would like to become, rather than just hiding them away and moving to the next one. These Zentangles are an example of that from a couple months ago. I'll get to them, yet. No energy, no drive. Sit down, watch book arts videos, free or paid. There is an abundance available, and even making the structure with no content keeps me at it. Create community. Prior to this year, I had only dabbled in Instagram, but I've developed community there. I like to comment on the work of friends from classes or those making books. Positive feedback leads to followers who also comment on my work. I've also started a local meetup for the Handmade Book Club. Here's a photo that comes from that. When I endeavor to learn a new skill like Zentangle, I join a Facebook group or two that I find as well. And finally, I listen to the exhibit calls from several sources. Many a prompt goes by without creation, but often calls lead me to the most integrated content and structure, like Steps Through Time. To receive an award for structural innovation is a very meaningful accolade for me. It's been a good year. I urge you, listen to your inner voices. They may want something from you, which will bring you joy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, Denise. That was a wonderful presentation. And I'd like to remind everybody, don't forget to use the Q&A feature if you'd like to ask any questions for the artists after both of the presentations have finished. Right now, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Donna for her presentation. Donna?
Okay, can everybody hear me? Hello, everybody. And thank you for the opportunity to present. First, I need to say, Denise, I think I need more sleep than you do because yours is amazing. My gosh, getting so many books done in such a short period of time, and all of them are so unique. I tend to focus more on using a lot of the same imagery in my books over the years. And similar to you, Denise, I've worked full time for 30 years and only have begun to make more books in the past several years since I've stopped working. I have made books here and there over that 30 years, but really it's been recently. And I've also joined NEBA, New England Book Artists, and a lot of their calls have prompted me to keep on moving and keep on exhibiting. So in the past 3 or 4 years, I think I've exhibited a lot more than I had in maybe the 15 or 20 before that. I'm going to share my screen and talk about some of the things that I've been recently doing. Okay, there we go. Can everybody see that? Okay, so I've got, it's just simple Acrobat slides. So I've been involved, and then again, this is NEBA who prompted me to learn about zines, and I found that kids love making zines. And so when I went for the second time to do an English language immersion summer camp in Eastern Europe with kids who were ages 8 to 14, I worked with the older kids making books that were a little bit more complicated. But with the younger kids, the 8 through maybe 11-year-olds, I found that they really loved making zines, and it helped them with their language skills. They had to only write in English and only talk in English. And their English language skills came alive, and obviously their creativity is quite evident in all these zines. So this is a cross-section of zines that kids made in 2022 in a 2-week-long camp. These are zines made by those of us who contributed to a zine swap through New England Book Artists. And you can see the little sleeve that's made. And I don't even know how many were in this, but I think this was the 2021 group. And mine is right here. It's called Minimalist Menu. And there it is with a smattering of pages from it. One of the things I really like to do is work with structure. And I entered a few of the exhibits from New England Book Artists again, focusing only on structure. This was an exhibit called Cape Bound, which was exhibited at a gallery on Cape Cod. And I think the theme was beaches on the Cape. I'm not sure if it was just the Cape or beaches on the Cape. but I decided to focus on beaches. And this one is called Ars Libre, which is free verse. And I thought free verse was a way to say it's about waves, because waves are free, and yet they are repetitive in a way. So they're almost like a verse that repeats. So this is the book, if you would, which is made of two separate pieces of paper. It's conceptual, I can never say that correctly. And the book is approximately 23 inches in depth when opened, but when flat, it's approximately 6 inches wide by 9 inches high. And you can tell my background is graphic design. I don't know, in the book arts, is it width by height or height by width? I always do width by height. This is the book when it's standing up, and this is what it looks like from above. This is a book also for the same exhibit, simply titled Dunes, and it's kind of obvious. I want to focus now on the book that's at the Decatur Center for the Book, and it's called The Story of My Home. This was initially made for another NEBA event, and I'll just read from this piece of paper here first, and then I'll show you images. So in 2004, I purchased land in Vermont, and I built a 2-story, 900 square foot cottage with a 16-foot by 24-foot footprint. I'm really into the golden ratio, and I hired an architect to do sketches for me. I built the home in a rural area, and at that time, Vermont was still very, very relaxed, if you would, with its building permitting regulations. And I didn't have a lot of money. I wanted to do a minimal footprint, and I wanted to maximize the use of materials in a minimum amount of space. And I had read a book called The Old Way of Seeing by an architect whose name is Jonathan Hale. I read the book back in the 90s. I ended up contacting his publisher and asking if I could have his information, and they said, of course not, we'll get it to him and he will contact you if he's interested. And he did, and he ended up literally scale drawing the home on 8.5-11 sheets of paper. And that was good enough for the builder, and I built my home. So I ended up renting the cottage, although I wanted to live there myself. In 2007, I decided to finish the basement into a small 300 square foot studio where I lived on the weekends. I enjoyed designing and building to minimize cost, maximize space. So in 2008, I added a 900 square foot apartment to the east, designed to complement the original cottage and to provide privacy for each apartment. Both of these structures were designed by Jonathan, both on the 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper given to two different builders, and all designed according to golden ratio proportions, which is roughly a 2-to-3 ratio. In 2021, many years after I had lost contact with Jonathan, I decided that I could add a fourth apartment that I designed myself. So I did, adding it to the west side, the opposite side of the original cottage, still prioritizing privacy and space. This would be the fourth apartment, all with separate entrances, all trying to make sure that each was private. So maximize space, minimize cost. My cottage grew from a 24-foot length to a 90-foot length, with no apartment more than 16 feet wide. The problem was my town's zoning code, which requires 5 acres per residential structure. My acreage is just a little bit over 7, so I could only build 1 residential structure. Therefore, I have attached connectors actually satisfying code while providing each apartment a private entrance with usable space between the main living areas. While building the fourth apartment, I entered a book arts exhibit with the theme Building Books. So I decided, well, I'm building my home. I'm in the throes of working with contractors and subcontractors and purchasing materials, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to build my home as a book. It's proportioned exactly like the real home. The 3 main and 2 connector footprints, walls, gables, and roofs, are the pages. I started with the floors as 2D flatland. Connectors literally connect. They are sewn to the main parts of the book home. Walls and gable pages radiate from each floor and are designed to turn, to refold, and or to balance to be 3D. The book has neither images nor text, allowing all focus to be on proportions and structures. And Denise, I heard you say that you like structure, but you also want to work with content. And I just found that I loved working with the structure. And so I went for it with this one. I didn't put one mark in this book. The only marks, if you would, are the stitches that are connecting the different parts of the book house together. In working, I used the proportion 1 centimeter equals 1 foot. So here's my house. This is the initial cottage. This is shortly after it was built. I think this was taken in 2005. This here shows the first edition, which is to the east of the house, and right here is the connector. This little sliver that you see is the original part of the house, and this is a summer. This is probably a July scene. I don't remember what year this was taken, but the daylilies bloom in July, so it must be a July scene. This is the original cottage here. This is the second part that was built in 2008 with the connector, and this roofed area here with the little doorway and this little window here is the semi-basement studio. So this is one apartment which is 2 stories. This is one apartment which is a basement studio, and this constitute 1 2-story apartment. And the curious part of this one is the bedroom is in the basement. It's literally built into the hill, and the upper part is, if you would call the living area, which is 1 great room, which is the kitchen and the living room. I just threw this one in here because I thought the picture was so pretty. So that's the whole house that was taken last year. Just within the past couple of weeks, this part has been sided, so it doesn't say Tyvek on it anymore, but this is the addition, which has a connector here and another apartment here, which is only 1 story with a very high cathedral ceiling. So there's the back of it. That was just taken maybe a week or 2 ago after the siding was complete. This is the new structure. This is a connector. You really can't see too much, but this is the original cottage, and this little sliver that you see here is the addition that was put on in 2008. There's the connector, and there's the book. And I owe a credit for the photographs to New England book artist Christina Hayosi, who took the photographs, and they're posted on NEBA's website. So that's the book all folded up. That's it opened, and you can see how it mimics the house structure. That's literally opening and closing the pages. And it's meant to be played with. It's meant to open and close as if you're turning the pages of the book, but really, as you're turning the pages, you're folding to make a 3D structure where the book then becomes parts of the house. So you're literally building the house, building the book. There it goes. It's closed up again. Open. A close-up of moving and opening. And that's it.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so very much. We're going to chat a little bit with our artists before we close this evening. So don't forget, if you would like to ask any questions, please do so by placing them in the Q&A. We'll also check the chat if you prefer to type them there. But yeah, we can all come back on video and just be prepared for any sort of questions. I do like that you both mentioned, you talked a little bit about structure versus content, which is something I've had to deal with the exhibit over the years when we first inherited it from the Atlanta Institute of Art that was here and moved it to the library. Dot Moy, who was instrumental in this exhibition, we were setting it up and we had some wonderful blank books that were made from like lucite pages. And I remember turning to her and say, Dot, there's no words on these. And she's, they're book objects, Joe. You have to let this go. It's a book object. So what sometimes drives you all, with the house and then, with the blank books and some of the building structures, is it like, I feel it's a chicken and the egg thing. What comes first? Is it the structure of the book that may guide you, or is it a literary inspiration or words that sort of like bring it all, to the front for you?
Yes. How about just yes? Right, because it depends on the book and the impetus. So I think I didn't say much about it, but I'm a word person first. And so for me, it's often something that's going on playfully about the language, but a book doesn't usually come together fully unless I have a structure. So I think the idea, the theme, the material, the paper even plays in my head until I have, how will this work, right? So with steps through time, when I realized that I could flip those pages and that would be able to put the same time but different places together, it was perfect for time travel. So until I worked that out, I didn't have a book. I had an idea. Right? Sort of answers your question.
Donna, what about you?
I always go with structure first. I'm so fanatical about like golden ratio proportions or square or double square. I always go with the structure, maybe because I like to say I grew up in the printing industry. My dad had a printing company, and it was always about paper, and it was always about ordering paper that was a certain size and fitting stuff onto paper. I mean, this is way before the internet, and designing magazines and books and brochures and posters. And then I taught graphic design for 30 years. And most of that time, well, maybe half of that time, was print design before screen-based design became a thing. And I was always into working with structure. And I interestingly taught typography for most of those 30 years that I was teaching, which is content. However, I've always been just soothed and taken by working with structure. So I work with grids, I work with formats, but I always try to play with the numbers. And even when I work with type, I work with the structure of type, like the sizes. I once did a book that played with the proportions not only of the pages, but also of the sizes of the type in relation to the content of the book. So there were a lot of dates involved in the storyline of the book or the content of the book. And I used those dates and I used typeface sizes to match those dates. Like, so something happened on the, the 18th of June. So I used 6-point type and 18-point type to talk about that or to reflect to that. Something else happened on, I don't know what other date, but I used those dates as typeface sizes. So I think structure just comes out even when I'm working with content.
Well, and I think it's also very interesting that your inspirations are poetry and legal building codes, because legal language and poetry are two very structured forms in language as well. So it's, there's even structure within the structure. Let's talk a little bit about, since you both are structural kind of folks, when you're constructing these pieces, what happens when something isn't necessarily working when you're doing this? Whether it's the type of paper, the structure of the book itself, something like that. Do you put the piece down? How do you move it forward? Or does there just come a point where you realize this is not working and I need to put this aside permanently?
I don't know about you, Donna, but I never say it's put down permanently. Even though it may be years or decades, right? I would say that I'm a big maquette person, so I tend to have the idea, but immediately start futzing with how can I make that reality and will these materials work? And so, a maquette might just be the structure, but it also might be, will this material work for that purpose? Because a certain weight of paper or a paper that has a different fibrous content or a different sheen sometimes won't work for things that we really want to use it for. We want to print on it, or we want it to glue, or I love rock paper, but you can't glue it. So I think that I do a lot of that in order to get things to work. And at the end of a day, when something's not working, you go to bed or you tell the story or you whatever and hope that the next day it's there. And if the deadline's around the corner, often it is there. But other things that you're just doing for your own love of doing them, sometimes they sit for weeks or months or years. But I never say I'm putting them down forever.
I don't know. I'm not one for making prototypes or maquettes. Although right here, sitting here that's about as close as I got. This is the one with the waves. But I just did it out of copy paper. It's funny because I also knit, and it's been impressed upon me by people who knit really, really well that I'm supposed to do a little square to check my gauge and to check if it's going to work. And I'm like, I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with hats and scarves, and then I don't have to do that. In the books that I make, I sort of like them to happen as they go. I don't, I figure out the proportion, um, but then like the number of pages and then how it'll all fit, it just kind of works organically. Um, Once that didn't work. When this is probably, oh my gosh, I think it was like 2008 that I took a class. It was a letterpress handmade bookmaking class. And by that time, I had been teaching, well, I taught since I started teaching in 1990. So I had been teaching for quite a number of years. And I had always admonished my students. This is kind of one of the don't do what I do what I say kind of things. I've always admonished my students to make sure what they're going to do is going to work and don't wait until the last minute to check something out. Well, I was taking this class and I was also working full time. And for the last class, okay, so no chance after this, it was the last class, we were supposed to put a book together, and we were supposed to put a number of pages together towards this book that everybody was going to bring pages for, and then it was going to be put together for the whole class, like one book with pages from everybody in the class, kind of as a keepsake book for everybody. I think my mind is a little rusty right now. I think the teacher was going to reproduce it or something. So we had certain parameters. And I decided that I was going to put my book on Bristol sheets, like a Bristol, probably like what is it, like a 65-pound Bristol or something like that, a smooth Bristol, not a vellum Bristol, but a smooth Bristol. And I figured that would work really nicely. It was a nice crisp sheet. It would be really great. So it was about an hour and a half before class. It was about a half an hour walk from where I taught to the place that I was taking the class. So I figured I'll walk there. I'll give myself an hour to put this book together. And sure enough, when I folded the Bristol, even though I scored it, it cracked. And rather than 4 pages nicely folded with a nice crease in the middle, I had 2 separate pieces of paper. And I'm like, now what do I do? Here I am doing the exact same thing that I yell at my students for doing, saying that I'm going to come in and say, well, I thought it was going to work. So I ended up using, I think, a nice, some kind of like a binding tape. And I said, well, this is going to be part of my design element. I'm gonna use binding tape. But no, usually, now I should knock on wood most of the time it works for me to just kind of kinesthetically work as I go.
So both of you mentioned during your presentation and kind of how, working with NEBA and, doing this, book challenge, and, the internet seems to proliferate with challenges and things like that. But then you also mentioned collaborations. How do these necessarily work for you as artists? Is collaborating with other artists or another single artist something that you do often? Do you find it restrictive? Do you find it freeing? Do you like maybe the structure of having that and having to play off of someone else's collaborative effort?
I can't remember any other time other than the zine swap where everybody contributes a zine, but that's a collaboration, but it's not a collaboration on the same exact thing, on that one piece. I never really had the opportunity to do it, so I really can't comment.
I find that for me, so I was an academic. I ran writing centers in higher ed for 30 years. And in order to publish or to get work out there, to go to conferences and things, I found that collaborators helped me meet deadlines. So it's really, for me, it's always been an asset rather than a detriment to have collaborators, because I can check my ego. It's not about mine or yours or anything else, but in order to keep moving forward, that notion that I've had with 100 days, one of the ways I've done that all my life is by developing collaborations. So I just met a brand new artist at a recent gathering of some of our local zinesters, and we would all always take books and show each other books. And so the next day I got an email from this new person, and she's a fabric artist. And she said, hey, would you like to collaborate? I'd like to do something. If I gave you a piece of fabric, would you try to jelly print on it, and then I'll stitch it, and then you can make a book from it? And I was like, heck yes. Like, sure. Over the years, I know that collaborations don't always complete, right? One person is more driven than the other, life happens, all kinds of things. And so I probably don't have finished work from collaborations more often than my own work, but that's okay, because it brings lots of other wonderful joys with it.
And you both mentioned zines as well. And, I working with, authors, quite a bit, there's a lot of talk about flash fiction as well, and how sometimes long format authors or, short story authors who may have a series of short stories, sometimes turn to flash fiction. Is this something that you all use maybe as sort of like a palette cleanser, or if you need to get something on the page or in a book or create something, is this a smaller format that allows you to have a small bit of expression sometimes while you're working on a larger body of work?
I think the last part of that's the easiest part to answer, which is yes, zines provide a nice like go-to respite in between other things. Absolutely. I've done some flash fiction over time, and I actually don't find it very zine-like because while a zine has to be small, a zine is also depending on visuals in a way that flash fiction isn't. And so flash fiction, the writing has to be super tight. But I just reached over to pick this up because I'm a novelist. And so, as someone who's written in the longest form, I find writing in making the shift to smaller forms like zines was initially a challenge, but once my basic belief is once you get down one format for something, it's internalized and you can reproduce it, and it's much easier once you've done that. So it looked to me like both Donna and I have made lots of zines, so they're internalized.
I actually haven't made a lot of zines. I encourage
And others make zines.
In fact, I did a zine workshop on Saturday, and I brought my 7-year-old granddaughter with me, and she was pushing out the zines. I mean, different. I mean, like bring a kid with you, or teach a kid, and oh my gosh, they come up with all kinds of ideas like so quickly. I mean, this kid did a zine where she wrote in, another zine where she cut out pictures and pasted in, another zine she took a black piece of paper and found a white colored pencil and made a night zine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a kid. And I tend to like mull over my ideas a lot. And so I don't do spontaneous zines. If I do a zine, it's like I think and I think and I think. I think I've thought through zines more than like major books that I've made. So that's interesting. It just, that your question prompted me to think about that. But but no, I've found the zine structure to be more repressive than it is to be opening, at least for me, because it's like you're forced into that little space.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, we're coming up on the 8 o'clock hour. And of course, I would like to welcome everybody that if they haven't visited the Decatur Library to see the lovely gallery installed on the 4th floor, if you are in the area, please do so. It is open Thursdays through Saturdays, 1 to 5, and by appointment. And if you are not in Georgia in the Atlanta metro area, do go to bookasart.com and you can see a virtual gallery of all of the pieces that are on exhibit, and you can see some of the older exhibitions that we have had in the past. Donna, Denise, thank you so much for this talk. I think it has been absolutely wonderful about form and structure, and you've been both very insightful and inspiring. And I hope that people check out some zines if they haven't yet. It is a very cool thing. And if you're in Atlanta Binge Books, they have a whole little section downstairs in the basement that I'm guessing is thousands of zines. It's one bookshelf, but it's probably thousands of zines due to the size. But yeah, wonderful, wonderful small format books that are just delightful to behold. So again, thank you all for allowing us to come into your homes tonight. Don't forget that these will all be posted to YouTube where you can enjoy them over and over. And I thank you again from the Decatur Arts Alliance and the Dekalb County Public Library for being a part of this virtual author talk, artist talk series for the Book is Art Volume 12, Rock, Paper, Scissors. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you all again very, very soon.
Thank you very much.